Today we're taking a look at the big world of ful, one of the most common breakfast dishes in the entire Middle East. It's basically any dish made from cooked fava beans, and there are literally hundreds of different ways to make and eat ful. In Egypt, it's the breakfast of choice alongside ta'amiyya, and it's the most requested recipe on the channel. If you're new here, I'm Obi. I'm not the biggest fan of beans, and I want to get you cooking delicious Middle Eastern food at home. This week I'm going to show you how to cook and serve fava beans the Middle Eastern way. It's a super versatile dish that you'll be able to incorporate all your favourite ingredients in. I'll show you how to prepare the ful and use it 3 different ways, each one with different flavours and textures, making them uniquely delicious. So now let's get right to it. Before you can make any ful dishes, you'll need to get your hands on Ful Medames. This is an ancient food that has been eaten in Egypt and the Middle East since the time of the pharaohs, and it basically means cooked fava beans. The beans themselves take hours to slow cook and soften. Because of this, most people buy cans of cooked fava beans, which you can get at any Middle Eastern grocery store. If you have a couple of these in your pantry, then you can heat them and be eating a full dish within a couple of minutes. Of course, if you can't get hold of canned ful, then you could just make it yourself. It's traditionally cooked in this funny shaped pot called an idra, or in English a bean pot. The unique shape combined with a very low heat is said to slow water evaporation, and allow beans to slow cook for hours without burning. Obviously, getting a special pot isn't a great idea unless you're a bean fanatic, so I'll show you how to make the ful at home using a regular pot. Of course, to make it, you'll need the right kind of beans, and these are whole dried fava or broad beans. Unlike the halved and shelled beans we used in the ta'amiyya recipe, these still have their skin, and so they take a lot longer to cook. So if you want to make it yourself, ful is pretty easy to cook at home. The key thing is it must be cooked low and slow for many hours. For this reason, most people will cook the ful on a small hot plate, and in theory a slow cooker would be a good substitute. The first step of cooking the beans is rehydrating them, and you can do this by placing 200 grams or 1 cup of dried fava beans in a bowl. To that you'll add a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and this just helps to break down some of the tough fibres in the bean skin. Pour over a large amount of water until the beans are completely submerged and you've wet half of your worktop. These then need to soak for 3 hours until they have inflated and doubled in size. When they're done soaking, drain and rinse your beans so we can start with the cooking. Add the soaked beans to a large pot, and then to help flavour them, add in a large tomato. In our house we also like to add a 1/4 cup of red lentils, but it's optional. You'll need to wash them very thoroughly if you want to use them. To season the ful, add in a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cumin, and if you want it to cook quicker, you can also add a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Finally, add in 1 litre or quart of boiling water, and turn the heat up to high. I doubled the amount of beans I was making, and now it's just a matter of bringing the pot to a boil. When it does boil, turn the heat down to your lowest setting and cover the pot. It should now simmer for 4 to 6 hours. When 4 hours have passed, start checking your beans for doneness. You want them to have cooked through with a soft tender inside and importantly have an edible skin. Drain off the beans and make sure to retain about half a cup of the liquid with them. If you're put off by the dark colour of the liquid, you could bring the pot to a boil at the start and then throw out the water and add new water back in for a lighter colour. So there you have it, homemade Ful Medames, and this is the building block for all sorts of ful recipes. You can freestyle with this and put together any flavour combination you like. The first way we'll use up our Ful Medames is by making ful iskandaroni. This is kind of like a warm fava bean salad, and it comes from the Mediterranean coastal city of Alexandria. Start off with 200 grams or 1 cup of cooked fava beans with a little liquid, and you can leave these whole or give them a quick mash to just break them up. To that add half of a red onion diced into small pieces. Next add in a diced tomato, which you also want to chop relatively fine. Following that you can add in 1 mild or hot green pepper, which I cut up into squares. Finally add in 1 clove of minced garlic. In terms of seasonings, add in 3/4 teaspoon of salt and the same amount of cumin. Follow that up with half a teaspoon of black pepper, and you could also add some chili powder. For liquids, add in the juice of a whole lemon or 2 tablespoons, as well as 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Then you just mix it all together very thoroughly until you have something that looks like this. Sometimes this has coriander or parsley added in as well, and you could serve this hot or warm. The next kind of ful we're making is ful mahrous, which means mashed ful. First thing I did was take a sieve and then strained 400 grams or 2 cups of ful to remove the extra liquid. Then I used a potato masher to crush the fava beans until they burst and formed a paste. When they look like this, the next step is to remove the skins. You can do this by hand before mashing, but it's a little easier to use a sieve. Place the mash in there, then use the back of a spoon to push the beans through the sieve. All the bean paste will pass through while the skins will remain in the sieve. When done, you'll have a pure bean paste that looks something like this. It's the base for any mashed ful dish. To make our version of ful mahrous, add 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil to the bean paste. When it gets to a hummus-like texture, you can add whatever flavourings you like. We added 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, half of a teaspoon of salt, 3/4 of a teaspoon of cumin, 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and a little chili. Then we added in 1 tablespoon of tahini, which we made on the channel a few weeks back. Finally, I added in 1 teaspoon of white vinegar and gave it one last mix. If you've got any salty or spicy pickles, you can blend them into the ful or add their pickle juice to give it a nice strong kick. When done, you'll have a homogeneous mixture that looks like this. The final kind of ful dish we're making is called Tagine ful or Ful Tagine. I'll be making this with a Middle Eastern spiced cured beef called bastarma. These ultra thin strips of meat are coated in a strong spice mixture, and you can get it at Turkish, Armenian or Middle Eastern grocery stores. Take about 50 grams or 1 3/4 ounces of the bastarma and scrape off the spiced coating. If you can't get this, just use any strong flavoured cured meat and slice it up into small squares. Next, place a saucepan on the stove and pour in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Add in half of a brown or white onion, which should be chopped to a medium dice. Saute this until the onions have softened and wilted. Next, add in 2 minced garlic cloves and the cured meat. Then saute these for a few minutes more until cooked through. Following that, add in 200 grams or 7 ounces of canned chopped tomatoes and mix everything into a sauce. Let this cook for about 10 to 15 minutes until it has reduced down like so. Now add in 200 grams or 1 cup of the cooked fava beans to the pot and stir it all together. To season, add in half a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, 3/4 of a teaspoon of cumin, and half of a teaspoon of chili powder. Mix it all together and you should have something that looks like this. Now take the bean and tomato mixture and add it into some oven-safe ramekins. Make a small well in the centre and then crack an egg on top. Some people choose to break the yolk, but I prefer it whole. Now place your ramekins on a tray before putting them in the oven. Bake the eggs at 180 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 15 minutes until the eggs are cooked through. And there you have it. Ful Medames is cooked and served 3 unique ways. Obviously there are many more recipes to serve these beans, so if you want to see more then let me know. Now let's go right to the taste test. That was surprisingly nice, and that's coming from one of the 7 Egyptians who dislike fava beans. The Ful Tagine really is amazing thanks to the sauce, varied flavours and great textures in it. You could easily customise the tagine or make a fava bean salad using whatever produce you have on hand. I'm certain that once you make this, you'll come up with many great variations on this Middle Eastern classic. Thank you for watching, and be sure to click the like, share and subscribe buttons to help us with the YouTube algorithm. If you make any ful, be sure to send us some photos on Instagram. As always, thanks to our Patreon supporters for making this video possible. If you like the recipe and want to help us make more like this, then consider becoming a patron. The link and recipe are in the description box down below, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.